Germany. Twice in the 20th century, the most militarily powerful nation in Europe lost world wars by repeating the exact same strategic blunder, separated by just 25 years. Not a similar mistake, the same mistake. In 1914, Kaiser Wilhelm's generals launched an invasion designed to knock France out of the war in 6 weeks, before Russia could fully mobilize. It failed. Germany found itself fighting on two fronts, and lost. This raises a haunting question. Why did Germany's military leaders believe they could defeat enemies on both eastern and western fronts, when geography, logistics, and history made this mathematically impossible? A. The answer reveals a fundamental truth about warfare. Germany's two-front wars were doomed not by courage or tactics, but by immutable geographic realities and resource mathematics that no amount of military genius could overcome. To understand this fatal pattern, we must examine the Schlieffen Plan's failure in 1914 and its haunting repetition a generation later. Europe explodes into war. At the heart of German strategy lies a plan 15 years in the making. The Schlieffen Plan, named for the chief of staff who designed it. The logic was brutal in its simplicity. Germany faced potential enemies on two sides, France to the west, Russia to the east. Fighting both simultaneously would be suicide. Therefore, Germany must defeat one before the other could mobilize. Russia was vast but slow. The German General Staff estimated 6 weeks before the Russian army could fully mobilize and threaten East Prussia. France was close, compact, and connected by rail. Alfred von Schlieffen's solution: throw 90% of the German army westward in a massive wheeling movement through Belgium, encircle Paris from the north, and force French surrender within 42 days. Then, with France defeated, transfer the entire army eastward by rail to face the Russians. It required perfect execution. The margin for error was zero. On August 4, 1914, 1.5 million German soldiers crossed into Belgium. Brussels fell in 20 days. The German right wing, the hammer that would crush France, swept south like a gray tide. By early September, German advance units were just 30 miles from Paris. The French government evacuated to Bordeaux. The plan seemed to be working, but war is not a railway timetable. September 5, 1914. Along the Marne River, French and British forces counterattacked. The German First Army, exhausted after marching 400 miles in a month, had overextended. Its flank was exposed. In what became known as the Miracle of the Marne, French General Joffre rushed reinforcements to the front, famously using 600 Paris taxis to ferry troops. Germans retreated 40 miles, both sides dug in. Within weeks, trenches scarred the landscape from Switzerland to the North Sea. The 6-week window had closed. Germany now faced exactly the two-front war the Schlieffen Plan was designed to prevent. Because while the German army had been racing toward Paris, Russia had mobilized, not in 6 weeks, in 10 days. August 17, 1914. 800,000 Russian soldiers invaded East Prussia. The Germans achieved a tactical masterpiece at Tannenberg, encircling and destroying an entire Russian army. The victory required transferring 100,000 troops from the Western Front, troops desperately needed at the Marne. By December 1914, Germany was fighting 2 million French and British soldiers in the west and 2 million Russians in the east, across fronts separated by 1,000 miles. Geography doesn't negotiate, and Germany's geography had just become its death sentence. Look at a map of Europe. Germany sits in the center of the continent, the Central European plain stretching from France to Moscow. No mountain ranges protect its borders, no oceans separate it from enemies. This is Germany's fundamental strategic problem. You cannot fight Poland without making an enemy of Russia, and you cannot fight Russia without leaving your back to France. Any German expansion east automatically creates a hostile front to the west. Any expansion west creates a hostile front to the east. It's not politics, it's geometry. The Schlieffen Plan hadn't failed because it was poorly designed. It failed because it demanded something impossible: defeating a major European power in 6 weeks. Not 6 months, not a year, 6 weeks. Because that's how long Germany had before its geographic position forced it into the grinder of a two-front war. When the Battle of the Marne stopped the German advance, it didn't just save Paris, it triggered a countdown. Every day Germany remained at war. The mathematics turned more sharply against it, because Germany's industrial capacity could produce enough artillery shells for one front or the other, never both. 1915, 1916, 1917, the war becomes an industrial nightmare. At Verdun, the Germans attempt to bleed France white in a battle of attrition. 10 months of fighting produces 700,000 casualties, 300,000 dead, for no territorial gain. At the Somme, British and French forces attack German lines. The first day alone kills 20,000 British soldiers.
By November, 1 million men are dead or wounded.
The Allies advance 6 miles. On the Eastern Front, battles rage across Poland and Ukraine. Lines shift hundreds of miles. Millions more die. Germany is winning battles, but it's losing the war that matters, the war of production. Britain's Royal Navy blockades German ports, cutting off imports, no Chilean nitrates for explosives, no rubber, no oil from abroad. Germany's synthetic programs cannot compensate. Meanwhile, the British Empire spans a quarter of the globe. Russia's population exceeds Germany's by 50 million, and across the Atlantic, American factories are just beginning to stir. The two-front war has become a war of industrial production. A metric Germany cannot win against the combined might of the British Empire and Russian manpower. By 1918, Germany is drafting 17-year-olds. Hunger riots break out in Berlin. The army is exhausted. Then, suddenly, a miracle. March 3, 1918. The Bolshevik Revolution pulls Russia out of the war. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk hands Germany a staggering victory in the east. Lenin surrenders Poland, Ukraine, the Baltic states.
Territory containing 60 million people.
For the first time in 4 years, Germany faces only one front. Erich Ludendorff, the German quartermaster general, gambles everything on one massive offensive in France. He transfers 1 million troops westward by rail. This is Germany's last chance. American troops are arriving in France at a rate of 500,000 per month. The window is closing. March 21, 1918. The spring offensive, Operation Michael, smashes into British lines. German stormtroopers, using new infiltration tactics, advance 40 miles in 2 weeks. It's the deepest penetration since 1914. But Germany has no reserves left to exploit the breakthrough. British and French lines bend but don't break. By July, the offensive has exhausted itself, and now the Allies counterattack with American divisions fresh off the ships. The mathematics of manpower reassert themselves. Germany is outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time. In August 1918, Ludendorff calls it the Black Day of the German Army. Allied forces break through. German soldiers begin surrendering en masse. November 11, 1918. Germany signs the armistice. 2 million German soldiers are dead. The Kaiser abdicates. The empire collapses. The two-front war has claimed its first victim. You can't fight mathematics with courage, and Germany had just spent 4 years trying. 25 years later, a new generation of German generals made the same calculations and the same mistake. They would fight with speed. Blitzkrieg, lightning war. September 1st, 1939. Germany invaded Poland. Tanks and aircraft tore through Polish defenses in 18 days. The world had never seen warfare move so fast. May 10th, 1940. Germany invaded France. In 6 weeks, the exact time frame the Schlieffen Plan had demanded, the Wehrmacht conquered what 4 years of World War I could not. France surrendered. The British army evacuated from Dunkirk. Western Europe was Hitler's. Germany had finally achieved a quick Western victory the Schlieffen Plan promised. But Britain had not surrendered. The Royal Air Force fought the Luftwaffe to a standstill in the Battle of Britain. The Royal Navy still ruled the seas, and across the Atlantic, American industry was awakening. Hitler faced a choice: finish Britain first or turn east toward his ideological enemy, the Soviet Union. Geography doesn't negotiate, but Hitler believed he could. June 22, 1941. 3:15 a.m., 3.8 million Axis troops, the largest invasion force in human history, crossed the Soviet border in Operation Barbarossa. Hitler's generals had learned the wrong lesson from 1918. They believed the Schlieffen Plan failed because Germany wasn't fast enough, so they would be faster. The plan called for destroying the Soviet Union in 8 to 12 weeks, before winter, before Britain and America could matter. And for 3 months it looked like it might work. German panzer divisions advanced 400 miles in 3 months, deeper than they'd penetrated in 4 years of World War I. They encircled 3 million Soviet soldiers in massive battles near Minsk, Smolensk, and Kiev. Stalin's army shattered like glass. By November, German advance units could see the spires of the Kremlin through their binoculars, 15 miles from Moscow. Leningrad was surrounded. Rostov-on-Don had fallen in the south. But the Soviet Union did not collapse. Stalin traded space for time, retreating 1,000 miles rather than surrendering. Soviet factories were dismantled and moved east of the Ural Mountains, beyond German reach. The Red Army took catastrophic losses but continued fighting, and then winter arrived. December 5, 1941, Soviet forces counterattacked outside Moscow. German troops, unprepared for temperatures reaching -40 degrees, were driven back. Vehicles wouldn't start, weapons froze, men died of exposure. The 8-week window had closed. Hitler's gamble, like the Kaisers before him, had failed. Germany now faced unfinished business in the west and a resilient enemy in the east. 5 days later, Hitler made it worse. He declared war on the United States. Germany was now fighting the Soviet Union, the British Empire, and American industrial might. Simultaneously. History's most expensive, repeated mistake. Let's talk about factories. In 1943, Germany produced 25,000 tanks. Impressive. A testament to German engineering and industrial efficiency. The Soviet Union alone produced 50,000 tanks that same year. Add American and British production, and Germany was building 1 tank for every 6 the Allies built. Steel production? The Allies produced 3 times Germany's output. Oil? 5 times. Ammunition? 4 times. Wars are won in factories, and Germany was always outnumbered in the factory count. The German population, roughly 80 million, was fighting coalitions totaling over 300 million. Britain's empire, Russia's endless manpower, America's industrial colossus. You can't win a long war when you're outnumbered 4-1 and men of military age. The two-front war didn't just divide Germany's armies, it divided every resource. Every artillery shell sent east was 1 less for the west. Every fighter plane defending Berlin was 1 less supporting ground troops. Germany's enemies weren't divided. Soviet offensives were coordinated with Allied bombing campaigns. D-Day was timed to prevent German reinforcements reaching the Eastern Front. German war plans didn't fail because they were bad. They failed because they required miracles. August 1942. Germany's southern offensive reached Stalingrad, an industrial city on the Volga River. The battle for this city would become the turning point of World War II. For 5 months, German and Soviet soldiers fought street by street, building by building, sometimes room by room. The city became a moonscape of rubble. November 19, 1942. Soviet forces launched Operation Uranus, a massive pincer movement that encircled the German Sixth Army. 250,000 German soldiers were trapped. Hermann Göring promised the Luftwaffe could supply them by air. It couldn't. German transport planes were shot down by the hundreds. February 2, 1943. The Sixth Army surrendered. 90,000 frostbitten, starving German soldiers marched into Soviet captivity. In total, the Stalingrad offensive cost Germany 750,000 casualties. It was the first major German defeat of the war. The Wehrmacht's aura of invincibility shattered. And Germany was still fighting in North Africa, in Italy, in the Atlantic, in the skies over the Reich. The two-front war was consuming Germany from multiple directions simultaneously. June 6, 1944. D-Day. 150,000 Allied troops landed in Normandy, opening a true second front in France. Now Germany faced the literal scenario that had destroyed it in World War I, Soviet armies advancing from the east, Allied armies advancing from the west, and German forces divided between them. The Wehrmacht split its armies, 60% to the Eastern Front, 40% to the west. Neither was enough. By August 1944, Germany had lost 500,000 men in France. Soviet armies advanced 300 miles through Poland. German cities were being obliterated by Allied strategic bombing. The Weiss was closing. While German factories built tanks for the Eastern Front, Allied bombers destroyed the factories themselves. The Western Front come home. By early 1945, Germany was drafting 16-year-old boys and old men into the Volkssturm, the People's Militia. Ammunition was rationed. Fuel was scarce. The transportation network was in ruins. Soviet armies reached Berlin from the east. American and British armies crossed the Rhine from the west. May 8, 1945. Germany surrendered unconditionally. 5.3 million German soldiers were dead. 7 million wounded. The nation lay in ruins, occupied by the very enemies its geography had made inevitable. The two-front war had claimed its second victim. So why could Germany never win a two-front war? The answer is written in geography and arithmetic. Central European geography placed Germany between hostile powers with no natural barriers. No mountains, no oceans, no buffer zones. Any German expansion created enemies in the opposite direction. Germany's industrial base and population were insufficient to fight simultaneous wars of attrition against coalitions that collectively tripled its resources. Schlieffen Plan and Operation Barbarossa both assumed impossibly quick victories that would prevent two-front scenarios. But when these gambles failed, at the Marne in 1914, outside Moscow in 1941, Germany's defeat became mathematically certain. Only the timeline remained in question. The tragedy is not that Germany lost these wars. The tragedy is that German leadership repeated the exact mistake a generation apart, each time believing they could achieve in weeks what required years. 7.3 million German soldiers died across both world wars, along with tens of millions of Allied casualties, stemming from the same strategic error repeated. The immediate aftermath reshaped the 20th century. Germany was divided. The Cold War emerged from the ashes. The modern European Union was founded on a principle: never again would German militarism threaten the continent. The long-term legacy became military doctrine. During the Cold War, American strategy explicitly avoided two-front scenarios. NATO exists in part to prevent such configurations. The lesson was burned into strategic thinking. You can choose your enemies or your timeline, but you cannot defeat coalitions in opposite directions when they outnumber, outproduce, and outlast you. Today's Germany is embedded in the European Union and NATO, making a two-front war structurally impossible. It's a strategic lesson learned after 90 million casualties across two wars. Germany's two-front wars weren't lost through cowardice or incompetence. They were lost before the first shot was fired, doomed by immutable geography and resource mathematics. The courage of individual soldiers was never in question. German tactical excellence was real. But strategic overconfidence proved more dangerous than any enemy army. Geography doesn't negotiate. You can't fight mathematics with courage. And history punishes those who forget these lessons.